Hello, good evening, and welcome to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander. Welcome to our 279th step in our walking tour through the Bible. And I'm going to talk today about the 26th chapter of the prophet Jeremiah. The 26th chapter is rather unusual in that it's not Jeremiah speaking, it's a narrative about Jeremiah, probably written by his assistant Baruch, and it forms a discrete story. It is self-contained, except, of course, it's rather frustrating at the end. It doesn't quite tell us what happened. But as you know, people writing in those days were not so obsessed as we are with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and dramatic narrative structure. So what happens is this. Jeremiah is told by the Lord to stand in the court of the temple of the Lord, and to all the people coming up from the countryside, who are coming to worship in the temple of the Lord, tell them this. Tell them that the Lord says this: if you will not listen to me and follow my law, which I have given you, and pay attention to the words of my servants, the prophets, whom I have never tired of sending to you, although you've never paid attention, I shall treat this temple as I treated Shiloh, and make this city a curse for all the nations of the world. Shiloh, you remember, is the place where Eli hung out, and it's where the boy Samuel lived. But Shiloh is now no longer a temple. It was put down, it was destroyed by Josiah, the father of the current king. Now, there's something very strange about this prophecy. Jeremiah is going to stand at the gate and tell all these people, you haven't listened to the prophets the Lord has sent. You have not obeyed the law. You are going to be, the temple is going to be destroyed. It's going to be like Shiloh is nowadays, and Jerusalem is going to be a heap of ruins. Except, of course, he's telling this to the people coming in from the countryside who are going up to the temple. Now, I'm assuming here that the people going into the temple are law abiding, Torah observant people. They're the sort of people who supported the reforms of Josiah, the father of the current king. They're the sort of people who aren't breaking the law. So why is he telling them this? What he's saying is, because you haven't listened, you plural being the people of Israel, this temple will be destroyed, and you who love the temple, you're going to be left orphans. I think he's not quite berating the people going into the temple, he's berating the Jewish nation as a whole, and he's stirring up the temple loving crowds into a rebellion against their leaders, against the monarchy, and against the people around the monarchy. Or so it seems to me. And therefore, he's arrested. The priests and the prophets and all the people heard Jeremiah say these words in the temple of the Lord. When Jeremiah had finished saying everything the Lord had ordered him to say to all the people, the priests and the prophets and all the people seized hold of him and said, you will die for this. In other words, he creates a riot. And because it then says, why have you made this prophecy in the Lord's name? This temple will be like Shiloh, and the city will become an uninhabited ruin. And all the people, and the people all crowded in on Jeremiah in the temple of the Lord. So he alienates the congregation in the temple. The temple people want to kill him. Hearing of this, the chief men of Judah came up from the royal palace to the temple of the Lord and took their seats at the entry of the new gate of the temple of the Lord. Now, the leading men of Judah come out of the palace, in other words, shall we say, the government, the king's assistants, the cabinet, the civil servants, they come out, they take up their seats, they hold a trial. This is foreshadowing, I think, the trial of Jesus, isn't it? And it's also foreshadowing the trial of St. Paul. If you remember, St. Paul starts a riot saying, I'm here on trial for my belief in the resurrection, and the Romans had to haul him out. And similarly, this trial is to save Jeremiah's life. Otherwise, he's going to be lynched. Well, once again, we see quite clearly, the prophet is counter-cultural. The people who try and lynch him are the priests and the prophets and all the people, the religious people. The prophets, okay, they're not the prophet as in Jeremiah's a prophet, they are the false prophets. They're the cult of the prophets, they're the official prophets. But they're not, in other words, Jeremiah has severely alienated the religious establishment of his day. Again, this reminds us of Jesus. One of the things that Hans Kung said, and I remember reading Hans Kung's book many years ago. I now was a teenager, I've been quite shocked by it and quite annoyed by it. He said that Jesus was a layman. Jesus was not a priest. Jesus was not part of the religious establishment. Well, he's right about that. Jesus was not part of the religious establishment. Jesus was a thorn in the side of the religious establishment. Where did this man get these things from? Is this not the son of the carpenter? They ask. It's true Jesus is called rabbi, and he is a rabbi. And the truth of the matter is, anybody could be a rabbi. Anybody can teach. They may not necessarily get any pupils. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. If you get lots of pupils, you'll be a great rabbi. But if you don't get any pupils at all, you can call yourself rabbi. Or people can call you rabbi, but you're not really a rabbi, are you? Jeremiah, too, is somebody who is a critic of the religious establishment, as Jesus is a critic of the religious establishment. He's a critic of the Pharisees. He's a critic of the Sadducees. And Jeremiah goes down the same path. So they institute a trial. The priests and the prophets then said to the chief men and all the people, "This man deserves to die." So it's the priests and the prophets, the temple establishment, that makes the charge against Jeremiah. He deserves to die because he's prophesied against the city. And he's prophesied against the temple. You've heard it with your own ears, they say. And of course, the accusation brought against Jesus is he's prophesied against the temple. Well, so when we read about the trial of Jesus, we obviously have this passage in mind, don't we? This passage and the trial of Jesus, these two passages sort of interact. Jeremiah, however, replied. He actually defends himself to all the chief men and all the people as follows. The Lord himself sent me to prophesy against this temple and this city, all the things you've heard. So he claims he's got divine mandate for doing what he's doing. So now amend your behavior and your actions. He's got an audience, so he tells them what to do. He tells them what he's meant to tell them. Listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and the Lord will relent about the disaster he's decreed for you. For myself, I am, as you see, in your hands. Do whatever you please or think right with me. But be sure of this, if you put me to death, you will be bringing innocent blood on yourselves, on this city and on its inhabitants, since the Lord has truly sent me to you to say all this for you to hear. So he throws down the gauntlet to the people, saying, murder me, and you'll just make yourselves even more guilty than you already are. Once again, he's being countercultural, but this is a man who's so countercultural, he actually risks his own life, and he goes further, he actually dares people to murder him. And they back off. The chief men and all the people then said to the priests and the prophets, now this is interesting. On the one hand, you've got the government and the people. On the other hand, you've got the temple establishment. And it's the government and the people who stick up for Jeremiah. This man does not deserve to die. After all, he's spoken in the name of the Lord. And some of the country's elders arose to address all the assembled people. And they said, well, this has happened before. Other prophets have said this. Micah, for example, said this. And was he put to death for that? He was not. Did they not rather listen to what he said, and avert the anger of the Lord as a result? And then it stops. The narrative rather stops, and one assumes that Jeremiah is acquitted. It's a bit of a pity it stops, but stops it does, because Jeremiah is not put to death. Jeremiah survives. But there's a little addendum to this. There was another man too, it says. There was another man too, who used to prophesy in Yahweh's name, Uriah, son of Shemaiah from Kiriath Jearim. He prophesied exactly the same things against the city and this country as Jeremiah. When King Jehoiakim, with all his officers and all the chief men, heard what he said, the king was determined to put him to death. On hearing this, Uriah took fright and fleeing escaped to Egypt. But then King Jehoiakim has him extradited from Egypt. Even in those days, extradition was possible. And and had him put to the sword and his body thrown into the common burial ground. Then it says, so in other words, Jeremiah is being extremely brave because there is a track record of killing prophets. Whether this Uriah, it was in fact a genuine prophet, the fact that he ran away seems to indicate he wasn't that brave and therefore didn't have the courage of his convictions. But Jeremiah had a protector in Ahikam, son of Shaphan, so he was not handed over to the people to be put to death. So Jeremiah did have powerful friends in high places who protected him. Okay, as I say, it's a short story, this, isn't it? And it's a little bit, it's a bit perplexing. What's it telling us? It's telling us that Jeremiah is a countercultural prophet. Yes, it's telling us that for certain. It's telling us that Jeremiah is brave. True. It's telling us that Jeremiah is not frightened to challenge power. He speaks truth to power. I think that possibly is the great lesson here. He risks his life in speaking truth to power. It could have gone either way. He could have ended up like this poor old Uriah. It's not necessary that just because he dares people to kill him, they won't take him up on his wager. So Jeremiah seems careless of his life. It's a very strange prophet, Jeremiah. Jeremiah almost seems to have a perverse pleasure in upsetting people and in driving people to the edge of insanity almost, starting off this riot in the temple and being a sign of contradiction. Jeremiah, perhaps more than any other prophet we've had so far, is a forerunner of Jesus Christ. I hope that helps. All the very best.